So welcome to Volume 12 of Barrier Island Books, the Bayside Book Chats. We're now open, and we've been very happy to see some of you folks in person and a lot of smiling faces, although behind the mask it takes us a little while to find out who you are sometimes, but we're very happy to have you back. And when we go to the door, we're going to have our hours posted, and of course that can be found on Facebook. And then when you come to the door, of course, you're going to have to put a mask on. If you happen to have forgotten yours, we'll try to provide you one. And we're now open. And as you come into the store, we've talked about this side over here with the fiction, and we've talked about heart, mind, body, and soul before. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the other side of the room a little bit and give you a little bit of a tour. So welcome inside, and to start off with, we have the new 2020, the Seashore at its Best Stone Harbor shopping guide, which is produced by my wife, who works for the Chamber of Commerce, and the photography is done by our photographer that we have art from in here, Michael Zaccato. So every year the Chamber picks one of his photographs, and that is what they use for the cover of the book. So we have copies of those in here, and inside you will find an ad to our store. So before we start the tour, of course, we got to fit this in. We are a used bookstore. So recycle, reuse, reread. Bring us your trades. Come and search our shelves and save a book. And if you're on social media or you want to tell us in person, of course, love us. We always can use a new customer. So like us on Facebook, share, tell a friend. Parker and our friend Johanna will be doing my Instagram this summer. So check out Instagram for new messages and inspirational items from Barrier Island Books and Art. And yes, not only are we on Facebook, but we are on YouTube as well. So now we can start the tour, and we're going to start off with one of our prides of the store that we, so our hobby as well, which is the outdoors. So Parker, if you can pan around here. This whole section here is bird guides and stories of the outdoors and nature from all over the United States and beyond. And anybody who's a nature lover really likes this section. Over here, and Parker will turn around, we have a mixture of art from my father mixed into another nature section. This is a little bit more serious on the academic side, and there's some really neat books in there. And on the bottom, we have a lot on gardening and plants. And as we zip around here, and Parker, you're going to take a little turn and catch this end corner cabinet here. This, I'll switch to the other side. This cabinet here is like the 5 states of local history and environmental history, Pennsylvania up to Connecticut, down to the Outer Banks. Really a lot of neat things in here. We are called Barrier Island Books and Art. So in here we have a lot of books on the arts. It's architecture, photography, art history, and photography, the movies. This section here is a lot of collectible stuff, and we keep a lot of our local history underneath. If you've ever been here before, I don't even have it all sorted and priced yet. Sometimes we have to make that up as we go and look things up. But this is an area where I'll display more collectible books on the environment and local history. And as we move backwards behind me, you can see our back wall, which we've talked about in previous episodes. So we don't need to discuss that. We have a very nice non-fiction biography memoir section, and on the end cap here, stacked from the bottom to the top 2 rows, a lot of rock and roll. As you know, my wife Marnie and my daughter Parker are very involved in music. We have a large Western, cowboy, Indian, history of the West section, and one of our sometimes missed sections is we have a very large sports section, and this is all sports, but a lot, of course, Growing up in the Philadelphia area and being a Philadelphia sports fan, we have a lot of Philadelphia sports history. There's a lot of reference books below me. And then over in this corner, we have the before mentioned tons of paperback classics. They're all over the place back here on the floor, in this shelf, in the corner. And as we start up here, we have some in this shelf here. A lot of poetry is in here. A lot of older books are in here. And then on the top shelf, we have a whole row of children's classics. And then we have hardback classics, about 3 rows of that. We have a lot of philosophy. We have biographies on major American authors. And in this bottom section down here is religions, not just Christianity, but all religions. This is a very thinking man's corner between the classics and philosophy and religion. And as mentioned many times in our book chats, we are very much into history. And of course, we call this the Bayside Book Chats based upon FDR's Fireside Chat. So a lot of presidential history. Then we have military history by war and time period. And as we creep over this way, we have a lot of nautical history and military historical fiction. We have a wall that has a lot of collectible Jersey Shore and nautical, you know, whether it's oyster cans or New Jersey beer cans, anything that has to do with a captain, or old postcards of bathing beauties, and a lot of our artwork. And we've talked about this corner before. It'll be featuring different stuff at all times, but very nature and ocean driven. And we hope that you come in and browse our shelves. We'll be very happy to direct you and share with you our minimal knowledge of books. So before we start our usual book chat in the corner, we're going to mention that we are not this week going to do the PBS Top 100 list, and we're not going to follow up on our trivia, but that will occur in volume 13. But in a previous episode, I did mention that we all need hobbies to help us escape, you know, some of the stress of the pandemic that we're all experiencing. And we had started off last time with outdoor hobbies, fishing and birding and walking and hiking. This time, we're going to talk about some books that I have to show you about sections we have in the store that are based upon hobbies that the store is actually named. So it's Barrier Island Books and Art, and someday in the future I'm sure it's going to be called And Music. So here are a few things that I'd like to show you that are along those lines. And we have a very large music section. It's growing every day. Here we have some writings by John Lennon. We have a book of a gentleman who was the sound man for the Stones, the Who, Zeppelin, Eagles, the Faces, Clapton. We have one of Parker's heroes and somebody that I need to learn more about and become more like, Dark Horse, The Life and Art of George Harrison. One of the greatest guitar players of all time, and Parker finally got to see Purple Rain recently, My Life with Prince. Before my time, but a big pioneer of rock and roll, and anybody before me has crazy stories about the hoopla that surrounded this man. Last Train to Memphis, The Life of Elvis Presley. In this state, you can't get away from him, and he was, Jersey Girl was my wife and I's dance song for our wedding. Bruce. One of my favorite musicians, Neil Young. One of Johanna's favorite musicians, or at least her father's, Bob Dylan Chronicles. And one of my daughter's favorite bands of all time, and I have a feeling will continue to be, despite others' fads coming and going. We've got a lot of stuff on the Beatles. Artwork is a big part of our store. You know, regular art, as maybe described, paintings and what you think of art. But of course, in this store, we've incorporated art into the natural world, and our artists that are in here incorporate all that. So we already talked about how Michael Zaccato does the cover for the guide, and of course Parker's shown pictures before. We carry Michael's artwork, and he and I had a discussion last week. We've always done very well with his note cards, and I'm sure he'll be getting them in here very soon. Speaking of note cards, behind me are some great self-created graphic art by Mary Place from Cape May, and one of my favorites is this note card of a egret. She also does notepads with horseshoe crabs and a diamondback terrapin on it. The mural that Parker has referred to before, and I'm sure she can incorporate another clip, especially with now that we've added my father's artwork up there on the mural. Parker will take a picture and add that in. That was painted by Anthony Hillman, a very infamous local bird carver. Parker has shown you these pictures before. He does this great artwork of bookmarks, and of course we have his decoys, and we had a discussion last week of gearing up for this season of what he's going to be bringing in. And then as mentioned, my father, just if you've seen some of our posts, has just given us about 20 wonderful pieces of art, and this is a spotted sandpiper. So of course we are a bookstore. So if you're going to have be involved in art, you got to have some art books, and we've got way more than I'm going to show you now. This is a book on American watercolor paintings. And of course, if you're down the beach, you got to have a lighthouse. Where I grew up, a lot of Pennsylvania Dutch Amish history, and a lot of their furniture, of course, is art in itself, built in the 16, 17, 1800s. And if you need to know how to do it, drawing and painting the world of animals, learn how to paint animals. If you don't like animals, but you think you like people more, which I think some people like animals more than people, draw people every day, how to draw people. Another book just on another way to draw, call it How to Draw in Color. And then you can get into artists. Frank Herman, paintings from 1999 to 2001, so some modern art. And going back in time, Van Gogh. Crisscrossing music with art, the paintings of Sir Paul McCartney. One of my favorite forms of art, Impressionism. If you're down at the beach, Manet and the Sea. We also have a book of the great painters of the world. This is an example of some of the big tabletop books that we have here to sell at Barry Island Books and Art. So this is the segment that I call the Thoughts from 10,000 Feet, and this is the part where we get into why we call it the Bayside Book Chat, and that's the leadership of FDR through some tough times. And obviously this country right now is having some tough times, and we're thinking our way through it. And you know, with that we need leadership, and I've talked about how the book profiles encourage. I'm still waiting for somebody to reach that level that could be in a book like that. But there are people who are heroes of mine for things that they have done that are beyond my abilities, things that I wouldn't be able to do due to the fact that being a Caucasian, and I would not be able to do the things that these folks did, but also in the sense of their vision, their bravery, their stance, and their Harriet Tubman and John Lewis and Elijah Cummings. And we're going to share some quotes from them, but being as this is based upon FDR, we're going to start off with a quote from FDR about equality. And FDR said, "If civilization is to survive, we must cultivate the science of human relationships, the ability of all peoples, of all kinds, to live together in the same world at peace." And I'm going to flip through my screen here, and I'm going to share some quotes from the folks that I have mentioned. And we're going to start off with John Lewis, a congressman who is one of the top 6 recognized civil rights leaders in this country. If something you see that is, pardon me, if you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation to do something about it. Also by John Lewis, freedom is not a state, it is not an act. It is not some enchanted garden perched high on a distant plateau where we can finally sit down and rest. Freedom is a continuous action we all must take, and each generation must do its part to create an even more fair, more just society. Recently passed away was Representative Elijah Cummings. Locally, we have a local politician running in a Democratic primary whose name is Will Cunningham. He did work for Elijah Cummings for a period of time. Elijah Cummings said, "I will fight until the death to make sure that every citizen has that right to vote, because that is the essence of our democracy." And he did work until his death, and after he passed, it was said of him by Dr. Maya Cummings, and you have to forgive me, it could be his wife, I'm very sorry that I don't know the direct relationship. He worked until his last breath because he believed our democracy was the highest and best expression of our collective humanity, and that our nation's diversity was our promise, not our problem. And then moving on to Harriet Tubman, which my daughter Parker and Phoebe, not only did they attend the opening of the Harriet Tubman Museum in Cape May. Harriet Tubman had spent some time in the summers earning money there to continue her work in the Underground Railroad. She raised the funds by working in Cape May, and then in the winter times continued her efforts in the Underground Railroad. My wife Marnie, with her musical troops, raised several $1,000s for the opening of that museum, so my parents and my daughters attended that. And then later that weekend they took a ferry ride down to the plantation in the museums and what they had to offer down there to share the history of Harriet Tubman. If you haven't seen the movie that came out last year about her life, I highly suggest it. Harriet Tubman says, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world." And then she also said, "If you hear the dogs, keep going. If you see the torches in the woods, keep going. If they're shouting after you, keep going. Don't ever stop. Keep going. If you want a taste of freedom, keep going." And I hope that all of us keep that quote in mind when we think about what freedom means to us, and maybe how easily we take much of it for granted, or how little we have done ourselves to have it, for ourselves or for others. And the show is wine night, and you need to end on a wine quote. And my quote for tonight is from Omar Khayyam. "The wine of life keeps oozing drop by drop. The leaves of life keep falling one by one." So during these tough times, I hope we all are inspired by the leaders that I have mentioned, and by this quote. You know, time keeps marching on. The seasons keep changing. It is up to us to decide how the leaves fall, and how we're going to rake them, and what we're going to do with our future. So thank you all for viewing. That's the end of Volume 12. Next week on Volume 13, we'll get back to the PBS and the trivia, and we'll pick another hobby, and we'll share a little bit of what's been going on. And in the meantime, you're more than welcome, obviously, to come see us at our store. Come see us in person on Wine Night, Wednesday. And until then, take care.